Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron. I hope you're having an incredible day or night in Jesus. We're looking at God's total causality and monotheism. And this comes from John Duns Scotus from the 1200s AD. Let's get started. Thanks for being here. We're on the Stanford Dictionary of Philosophy, plato.stanford.edu, excuse me. So let's jump in. I almost skipped over this part, but we probably need to go over it if we want to do a thorough understanding of monotheism. Of course, monotheism is taught most specifically in Scripture. These are just discussions of the scriptural teaching of monotheism. What are some of the implications? So John Duns Scotus offers several proofs of God's unicity. Unicity. Love that term, unicity, because I'm a Christological monotheist, as they had a deal in Scotland not long ago about that. Or maybe it was quite some time ago now. But so in his Ordinatio, Scotus's fourth proof is based on the theistic intuition that God is the complete or total cause for everything else. We cry out to God, not to multiplicity. His argument is roughly thus: necessarily, if anything is a God, its creative volition is a necessary and sufficient causal condition of every other concrete object. So if there is a God and he's a creator, and he is, and it's so obvious, obviousness of creation. I did a video I had to delete called The Obvious Principle. Got a lot of views, but I got attacked so bad. And some people can't handle discussion. If it's evolution or nothing, and they're vehement, so I deleted it for fear of my life. So contingent beings exist, and there are two gods. It follows that each is a necessary and sufficient causal condition of the set of contingent beings. Therefore, the first is a sufficient causal condition of the set of contingent beings. Hence, the second is not a necessary causal condition of the set of contingent beings. Again, the first is a necessary causal condition of the set of contingent beings. This is John Scotus talking about his understanding of unicity or monotheism. Therefore, the second is neither a necessary nor sufficient causal condition of the set of contingent beings. A similar argument will show that the first is neither a necessary or sufficient causal condition of the existence of the set of contingent beings. It follows that, you can see why I almost skipped over this, neither God is either a necessity or sufficient condition of the existence of the set of contingent beings, such as creation, animals, humans, or even angels. If contingent beings existed and there were two gods, each would be a necessary and sufficient causal condition of the existence of the set of contingent beings, and neither would be necessary and sufficient causal condition of the existence of the set of contingent beings. But since the consequent of 11 is impossible, its antecedent is impossible. Thus, it is impossible that contingent beings exist and there are two gods. Therefore, if contingent beings exist, there cannot be two gods. There only has to be one God. Because if there's a creator and he created beings that are not him, that's Spinozian pantheism. And so if there's a creator and there's created beings, there couldn't be two creators. There's only one creator. And because it would be impossible for two to truly be God and to truly be perfect, because then you get into identity, the identity crisis. If they're exactly the same, with the same thoughts, same everything, same centers of consciousness, because that's a necessary condition of omniscience, then they're the same thing. And so there couldn't be two persons. So Scotus's argument is firmly rooted in the theistic intuition that God's creative volition is a necessary and sufficient causal condition of everything that exists outside of him. But as it stands, it suffers from two weaknesses. First, the argument doesn't show that God is necessarily unique, but only that if contingent beings exist, only one God exists. But see, they do exist. The second and more serious difficulty arises from the fact there are at least two relevant senses of sufficient causal condition. Striking a match is a causally sufficient condition of the match's ignition in a standard sense, since under normal condition, if one strikes the match, it will ignite. Many other conditions are causally necessary for this event to occur, such as oxygen, etc., and all this. the match not being wet and light. But in a stronger sense, X is a causal sufficiency condition of Y if and only if X alone Y exists or occurs. And in that sense, striking the match is not causally sufficient for the match's ignition, since other conditions are needed as well. And so I'm going to skip just a little bit here. But suppose, for example, that Abel would exist only if Adam and Eve were to freely copulate, and Adam and Eve would freely copulate in and only if God were to create them. By creating Adam and Eve, God brings about Abel's existence. Furthermore, since the truth of the relevant subjunctive conditionals, there's a clear sense in which God doing so is not only a necessary but also a sufficient causal condition of Abel's existence. For if God creates Adam and Eve will beget Abel. It isn't sufficient in the strong sense, however, because God's creating Adam and Eve won't all by itself ensure Abel's existence, because they were free moral agents, even though God knew, but his foreknowledge causative. For that to occur, Adam and Eve's free decision to copulate is also needed. Theistic intuitions clearly support the claim that it is necessarily true that God's creative volitions are causally sufficient condition of the existence of every other concrete object, at least in a weak sense. It is less clear that they support the claim that it is necessarily true that God's creative volitions are a causally sufficient condition of the existence of every other concrete object in the strong sense. Theists with a robust view of human freedom, like me, for example, will deny that they are. The problem, in short, is this: in order to be valid, sufficient causal condition must be used in the same sense throughout Duns Scotus's argument. Both defects of Duns Scotus's arguments can be remedied, though. Even theists with robust views of human freedom can presumably endorse that. So if the first God is causally sufficient condition in the strong sense of the existence of at least one contingent being, then the second God is not a necessary condition of that existence, at least one concrete object that is distinct from itself. And of course, similar conclusion is true of the second God. Moreover, if God is a necessary being, as many theists believe, I would definitely believe that, that is, if God exists and is God in every possible world, I would definitely believe that, then the argument of first defects can be remedied as well, since the mere possibility of the existence of contingent beings be sufficient to establish God's necessary unicity. So, you have God as creator, God as causes of everything. I would say this strongly promotes monotheism, because you couldn't have two creators with two sets of contingent creations, because you would lose the absolute omnipotence of one, saying it did not create that. And if there's only one, then anything else you've got out there that is competing with it has to have all the attributes of the one, and then becomes the one, because there's no way to differentiate the identity of omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, all wisdom, all holy, all love, all being a key term. And so I would say Duns Scotus really has a good grasp of the unicity of God in that respect, that God is one, and that is monotheism. So God bless. There's one God. He became man in Jesus Christ. Love him, serve him. We're all going to meet him one day. We'll see you. Bye-bye.